I once had a meeting in the 90s with Harvey Weinstein. He said, "Are you implying that my directors have final say?" He said, No. I edit these films. It's me. I do it.
One, I'm glad Ian Katz has done this interview. Two, I'm glad Channel 4 haven't in any way tried to stop him doing so.
He said, "What was that meeting about?" I said, "He's just fired you."
And he looked at me and he said, "I dare you," in that Liverpool accent.
Yeah, that wasn't a Liverpool accent, by the way.
Hello and welcome to Insiders, a podcast all about the world of television with me, Peter Fincham.
And me, Jimmy Mulville.
This is the podcast for people who love TV and who want to know a bit more about what goes on behind the scenes.
You're dressed for a behind the scenes this morning, I see. Is this casual Wednesday, is it now?
This is how I dress, Jim. This is how I dressed.
This is how the cool people dress for work.
Don't we all dress like this now? I used to. God, if you go back a few years, when I was at the BBC, we were still in suits. And I remember,
Wasn't it top
I remember
hat and
actually,
tails in those days.
It wasn't top hat, not that quite long ago. But I think when I was there in the mid-2000s, and there's a kind of history of how to dress here, isn't there? I think the ties had come off generally. If you go back, let's say, to the John Burt era, Armani suits, ties, very much. By my time, the ties had come off, but I had all these suits made for me, tailored suits.
Yeah.
They hang in the wardrobe today. I look forward to funerals, because then I think I can wear one of my suits again.
It won't be long now, Peter.
It's one of the very few times I've got a reason for taking a suit out of the wardrobe. They're basically just there for the moths to eat, because we all dress casual now, don't we?
So if you predeceased me, you'd like me to wear a tie at your funeral?
Yes, if you predeceased me, I'm delighted because I'm wearing one of my suits. I saw an interview with James Longman, who produces SNL UK, and he told a great story. He had to go and meet Lorne Michaels
the great
in LA, the great
SNL.
Lorne Michaels, who I think is an old-fashioned, still wears a suit.
Well, he's in his 80s, so...
And so he dressed a bit more smartly than he did. The first thing Lorne Michaels said was, "I like you. You're wearing a crisp white shirt and a jacket. You don't see enough of that anymore."
No trousers?
I don't know. Well, like a newsreader in the old days. Hugh Edwards, very smart from the waist
Let's not go down that road. Talking about dress, I was at the launch of Smoggy Queens, the comedy we made.
I bet that was colourful.
In the Northeast, about a group of friends who are like to drag up and go out and have fun. It's a really funny comedy. Phil Dunning wrote it and stars in it. And everybody turned up, and I was so underdressed. I was just wearing a jacket and a pair of trousers and a shirt. But there was a lot of colour on show. It was a very, very colourful event.
People in drag?
I wasn't in drag, no.
I've seen you in drag, Jim.
That's true. And
it's a look that suits you.
Someone said to me, they kind of looked at me because I'm of a certain age, and they assumed that you haven't had the kind of wild times. But I said, "Oh, I've been in drag," and this young person said, "Really? When?" I said, "Well, you remember I was at the Edinburgh Festival, and we were in a Footlights review."
What part were you? Because I remember mainly Clive Anderson.
Clive
Anderson dressed as a woman is immediately very funny.
Dressed as a man, he's quite funny. It was a song, and it was a parody of, was it the Ronettes, Leader of the Pack?
Yes,
right?
You're quite right.
So we were all dressed as leaders of the pack.
You were a Ronette.
We were dressed as women with the boobs and the hair the beehive haircuts. And I was having a frank exchange of ideas with the lighting guy from Oxford, because we shared this venue, didn't we?
Oh, we did, yes.
And I remember shouting at him and then seeing myself in the mirror dressed as a Ronette. It wasn't a good moment.
I thought there was no dignity in that.
No, there was. I had very little dignity at all. Ian Katz. We should just say because we didn't give him full justice last time, because literally we were walking out the door when Owen said, "Oh, by the way, have you read that Ian Katz has just resigned from Channel 4?" So we came back in the studio. We did a little bit about him to acknowledge his passing from Channel 4. But he's given this interview, hasn't he? He's
given an interview in the Times. It's a very good interview, actually, and he comes across well, and he says he's going to go and let the grass grow under his feet or something. He's going to read a book under a tree. But all of this I take as kind of code for saying, I want a break. I've decided to go in my own time and on my own volition. And I remember when I left ITV, there were people like the Times and the Guardian. They all wanted to do a valedictory interview with me. And the ITV powers that be wouldn't let me.
Why?
Because, I'll tell you exactly why, because this is the difference between a properly commercial organisation like ITV and Channel 4 is that the minute the announcement's out there and they've said who's going to be your successor.
It's all about the future.
It's all about the future.
You're just dead meat.
You know the waters have closed over you, and they don't want to look back. And I was quite keen to do it because there's also a thing that if you leave a job of your own volition and in your own timing, but you don't know
what you're claiming you did with
I'm
ITV.
Absolutely claiming I did, but you don't know what you're going to do next because you want to have a break or whatever. I seem to remember I was saying I'm planning a midlife crisis now. I want to see what the midlife crisis will consist of. The danger is that there's a sort of subtle implication that you've been pushed out, that you were pushed rather than jumped. And that may even suit the place you worked for before because it makes them look macho and as if they've controlled events, which is what they always want to look as if they've done. Whereas, of course, again, back in Channel 4, which is not a commercial organisation in the true sense of the word, they're more relaxed about that. And I thought, one, I'm glad Ian Katz has done this interview. Two, I'm glad Channel 4 haven't in any way tried to stop him doing so. There's no harm at all in reflecting on what he's done over the last 8 years, and it will not in any way kind of affect or impede his successors or what goes on going forward. It's true, of course, that the minute that you resign, people are talking about runners and riders going forward. And I've already seen one of these lists, and it's got some names on it. People you and I know, I'm guessing, and one or two people well, I don't know at all. But let Ian Katz have his kind of moment, have his moment in the sun.
Yeah, he's not cold yet, is he? And they're just talking about who's going to
yes, exactly.
who's going to come in. Who would have thought that Matt Britton, who's now taking over as DG at the BBC, no one ever heard of Matt Britton.
No, and he'd had a career break. He'd left Google and had a bit of time. You know,
did he do an interview about
tending the roses or whatever? I don't know, but you make me think. Matt Britton, day one. I think it's next month. What will he wear?
It might be a crisp white shirt.
Crisp white shirt, the open neck shirt and jacket look. Or
I think he should go in a caftan,
bomber jacket.
A caftan and ruffle the feathers. Or a mankini.
Just one more thing on Ian Katz. It says he's stepping down in October. After seeing out the delivery of the 2026 slate. Now, that's interesting because does that imply that he's got full commissioning power between now and October? Because, again, there certainly was a time when the minute the announcement was out there, you immediately lost your power to commission. Particularly if you were going somewhere else that might create a conflict of interest. But anyway, the organisation, whether it was the BBC or ITV, couldn't have somebody who was leaving commissioning. And I'll tell you a good reason, and I've seen this happen. I've even done a bit of it myself. The danger is they spend all the money. The danger is they think
they get D-Mob happy.
They get D-Mob happy. They commission their friends. They do 2 series deals here and there where they wouldn't otherwise do them, because then by doing so, they're leaving their imprint on the channel for longer than they otherwise would.
It's a bit like in government. Didn't one government that was leaving leave a note on the desk
saying there's no money left?
Saying there's no money left? They spent it.
I think it was a Labour government when Tories came in after the Blair era, I think. So what you don't want, if you're Ian's successor, is to turn up and your colleagues say, well, unfortunately, we've commissioned dramas for the next 18 months. We've commissioned this.
Actually, we might get a bit of insight there because we have one of our guests coming on soon is Charlie Perkins, who is the head of comedy at Channel 4. So maybe we should ask her that question. How's she finding it in there? Is it stasis or is it business as usual? It's a really good question to ask, actually, because I think most producers find this, don't they, that we find that when there's a change at the top, we get told, it's a great idea, we really like it. Just everything's on hold at the moment whilst so-and-so gets his feet, her feet under the desk.
And of course that's bad news, because that's bad news for any broadcaster if you have a kind of interregnum where no commissioning gets done. Because particularly now that the world is so competitive, the danger is all those ideas go off to one of the streamers. And by the way, I think in that interview with him there was mention of How to Get to Heaven from Belfast, which sounds as if it's still a sore point with him.
Oh, did he bring it up? What did he say?
Well, I'm not sure whether he brought it up or the journalist brought it up, and I can't remember what he said. But you know, just to remind our listeners who may not remember this, obviously it's your story. This he commissioned and announced it.
Yes,
he hadn't got the money, and then you took it to Netflix.
Yeah, he announced it, and I think that was probably our fault as well. Channel 4 said, we love Lisa McGee's writing. Obviously, Derry Girls is a huge hit for Channel 4. And it's a real lesson that when you have a hit comedy, it just does so much good for the channel generally. Everyone talks about it. It gets awards. It's got a long tail. It's still very much watched on both Netflix and All 4. But he said, whatever Lisa wants to do next, we're in. So please, So he reads the script of How to Get to Heaven from Belfast, which is brilliant, and says we will put in our most amount of money per episode, which was a lot of money. It was a 7-figure sum. But sadly, it was only about a third of the budget. And this is basically a very common story now for producers, is they have a commission at a terrestrial broadcaster like Channel 4, BBC or ITV, but it's less than half of what they need to make the show. So unless you can find a co-producing partner, which you could, when the streamers came to town a few years ago, they were much more laissez-faire with
They didn't mind not having the UK rights.
They didn't mind.
Now they
but
do.
These days, if they're doing a show that is based in the UK, they realise that the UK and Ireland are probably going to be it's going to be the most popular in that particular territory. So they want to own it.
So that's the case, totally understandable. What are your other sources of finance? Essentially a distribution advance, which puts a lot of pressure on the distribution companies, and a tax break.
Yeah.
And that's or maybe you get a pre-sale in one territory, which means they come in as a kind of, commissioning partner, but they become ever more complicated to put together, these deals, don't they?
But do you find now that, for example, we're talking to a platform in Australia, and this was a show that was originally written for America, which was then rewritten and set in Scotland. The writer is Scottish. And now we've reset it in Australia, and we have a bite in Australia. And we're looking for Australia.
Your bite is not going to be 100% of the budget.
No, but if we get an anchor broadcaster, you then can come back to the UK and say, oh, by the way, we just need a third of the budget. Are you in? It makes it more appealing to them.
Much easier.
But that's what's happening now, is we're doing much more of that kind of stuff, putting these things together. We've got this show which is set in Seoul in South Korea, and I'm trying to find a co-producing partner in Seoul, which is great because it's something I've never done before.
End up traveling the world looking for anchor commissioners.
I'm just floating around the world looking for money.
Exactly.
Well, I'm basically with my begging bowl.
When things sort themselves out in the Middle East, you never know.
Listen, I think the Saudi version of Outnumbered is just begging to be made. All right, so this is going to be a special edition, Peter.
Exactly. So this is, if you've sent in a question, you're thinking, when will they address the question? This is the episode.
Well, it might be.
We are going to do so. We hope so anyway.
Tell me, what's our first
So our first
poser?
one is from Jeremy Roberts. And he says this: I'd love to hear your thoughts on why film treats the director as the primary creative force, whereas in television that mantle falls almost entirely to the writer, who not only gets the glory, but sits at the top of the whole creative hierarchy. Is it rooted in history and convention, or does it reflect something more fundamental about how the two mediums actually work? And where does that leave all the television directors quietly fuming in the edit suite? Oh, there's a lot going on there. I'm going to pick out a bit of this and say, I'm not sure you're entirely right,
Yes.
Jeremy. You say, whereas in television that mantle, i.e. the primary creative force, falls almost entirely to the writer. Well, sometimes, but not always. I mean, maybe if you're Jed Mercurio, but a lot of television writers would say they don't feel like that at all. I think you could reasonably say it's often a more producer-driven business.
In the UK?
Yeah. But why, when people talk about movies, do they talk about it as the director's movie? But they very rarely do that with television.
Well, because that, I suppose, organically, in the days which predate TV, the great film directors were auteurs, weren't they? Although even in those days, the studio system was so powerful that directors were guns for hire as well. They turned out to be brilliant directors, but, in those days, in Hollywood in the 30s, 40s and 50s, they were making films every 4 weeks. So it was... But I take his point, and I think that is...
There is room in television for the occasional auteur. I used to make series with Stephen Polyakov, a brilliant writer-director, who was, you could call him that. Peter Kosminski's a sort of equivalent of that. Hugo Blick, do you know what I mean by Hugo
brilliant.
Blick? He only crops up
Absolutely
every few years with something
He began with Marion and Jeff.
Written and directed himself, and it's got auteur written, as it were, all over it. So it's not quite as simple as that, but I think this point is generally right, that in television, the director is brought on, in a long-running television series, you don't concern yourself with who's directed it as you might with a movie.
Well, you say that, but comedy, for example, you do want to choose a director who knows where the funny is.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've sat in edits where you sit there and you say, do we have his reaction to that? Oh, and I thought it looked nice in the wide.
Exactly. If you're working with a director in comedy who really loves the wide shot, because it's visually so great, you know you're in trouble.
We once did a show, which is a really good pilot, which never in the end got made into a series. It was commissioned by David Liddman at ITV. And it was during the Blair years, and it was about a prison, written by Tony Sarche. It was really good. And it was about a new prison governor who's very Blairite. And he comes in and he wants the prison system to be not a them and us system, but a we system. And he's trying to sell this to
That's a funny idea.
Alan Armstrong, a fantastic actor. And he plays the chief warden, who is not of that opinion.
Okay.
He thinks the prisoners are there to be oppressed.
It occurs to me the chief warden might be right.
Yes. So, well, I'm not going to get into that because I've got a different view on it. But anyway, about social programming. Don't get me down that road, Peter, now.
I'm not going to.
Okay.
Even if I did, we'd edit it out.
So
you can have a rant if you like.
Okay.
Believe me, I'll have a word with Owen.
Okay.
It won't make the edit.
You see, I'm being stitched up by the bourgeoisie here on this. So we make the show. And there's one scene where the fatal flaw of the chief warden is because this man he's dealing with, the governor, is university educated and very liberal, he feels compelled to use words he doesn't quite understand. So he embarks on sentences where he just gets his language mangled. And it's really, really funny. And he does it brilliantly. So I go into the edit and there's a director there who's a bit younger than me, not that much younger than me.
It's possible to be younger than you.
And I watch, this is a few years ago. Okay. This is like 20 years ago. And I watch it and I say, oh, okay. I said, I wonder, could we take more time with this scene? Can we have more pauses? Because the way they performed it was, it got more agonizing. Alan Armstrong got more agonizing as it went on and slowed down and slowed down and slowed down. It got funnier and funnier and funnier if you allowed it to play out. And she cut it down. So it zoomed through. The scene went bang, 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 bang. And it was over and done with. And she went, I don't think that'll work, actually. I think we need to move it. We really need to move. I thought it was a bit slow. So I said, look, can we just try it? So we tried it as it was written, as the writer had intended it, because Tony rang me and said, look, I think this scene's been ruined. And it was very funny. It was very funny once you liberated it.
Did the director then concede?
No, you know what she said to me? Oh, yeah, I can see that. No, it's more of a generational thing, isn't it? You know, your generation would like this.
She was playing that card.
And I felt like saying, listen, you know spring chicken, love. But, you know, I didn't say that.
Again, you didn't say that in the edit.
But the point I'm making is that at that moment,
I get that.
The producer overrode the director.
Exactly, because the producer had the whip hand.
Yeah.
But in movies, and this again goes back to Jeremy Roberts' point, obviously you get really powerful directors, they literally have director's cut. And then they've got the whip hand. But I don't think that ever happens in television unless you're writing, directing and producing, which I think somebody like Hugo Blick does. So I don't think this is convention, to go back to the question. There may be an element of convention. I can be honest, I think it's power structures. It's power structures. If you are, Downton Abbey.
Exactly.
Then who are the really powerful people in Downton Abbey? Julian Fellowes and Gareth Neame. Julian Fellowes, writer and creator. Gareth Neame runs Carnival, the production company. He's the executive producer, or whatever, Uber executive producer. They've got the power. So if they decide that they want to hire directors who shoot but don't edit, they will do that. And that happens not on all television drama. In other words, the director's job is done the minute that he calls wrap on the shoot, and then the producers and whoever else take over in the edit. That's fine.
But there are exceptions. For example, when you say famously you were pitched The Crown, Peter Morgan and Stephen Daldry were in the room.
Yes.
So Stephen Daldry is not chopped liver. He's
he's won an Oscar.
So he's not going to just lie down. He's going to. Peter Morgan wants him to come in and elevate it.
Yeah, and very successfully elevated and created, therefore, with Andy Harris, Peter Morgan and Stephen Daldry, to use a modern cliche, an undeniable group of people who definitely knew what they were doing. Of course, though, the promise was never there that Stephen Daldry would direct every episode.
No, he set it up.
He set it up, and actually, if you look at those early episodes of The Crown, they are absolutely brilliantly directed.
And the truth is that with the big streamers now, they will often say, can we get a proper filmmaker to make the pilot?
Yes.
To set the tone, to kind of set the expectations. And I would say that someday, even in film now, I would say it depends on as you say, where the power lies. I once, just to drop a real name from the past, I once had a meeting in the 90s with Harvey Weinstein.
Okay, all right.
He wanted to buy Hat-Trick.
Okay.
So,
well, we all have our price.
We were talking about, TV and stuff. And I mentioned something, and it must have upset him because he said, "What are you implying that my directors have final say?" He said, No. I give 2 directors final say. Quentin Tarantino and Anthony Minghella. Everybody else, I edit the show. I edit these films. It's me. I do it. Now, whether he was just being...
but that confirms what I'm saying, which is it sort of comes down to power and power structures.
Yeah.
So in the case of Harvey Weinstein in those days, massively powerful. So if you were directing a film for him, unless you were one of those 2 people, I'm slightly surprised about Anthony Minghella, but I mean, brilliant director. I'm not surprised about Quentin Tarantino. You're in a sense, you're buying into Quentin Tarantino's unique approach, and therefore he'll have director's cut and so on. But television doesn't really have a director's cut culture, does it? Well, look, Jeremy Roberts, thank you for your question. I hope we've given some sort of an answer to it. Let's move on to another one. This is from Andrew Nelson,
right.
Modern Commissioning Process. Andrew says, I've heard you talk about the difference between Netflix commissioning and a channel controller's thoughts when it came to renewing long-running series, and the fact that a broadcaster might be more inclined to keep a series going as it's easier than commissioning something new for that slot. It made me wonder whether those kinds of decisions are solely made by the controller or whether the person in that role consults more widely, and if so, who do they discuss this with? Does the scheduler get involved? Do the money people have a say? It would be great to know how big decisions like this are
Well, that's one for you, really.
Oh, it is a bit. And the answer, I think, is pretty clear, or it certainly is from all my time on the commissioning side. Yes, of course you consult. These are big decisions. You don't want to make them all on your own. And probably of the people, let's say it's a drama. So there's a drama commissioning department, a head of drama, a couple of other drama commissioners in that. You'll want them in the room, absolutely, because you'll want editorial reviews. Did this series work? Do we think it could, if there were things about it we weren't quite sure about, could they change in the second series and so on? But I would say the single most important person in that is the scheduler. And that is what leads you back to the point you're making in the question, Andrew Nelson, because the scheduler's got a schedule to fill. So the scheduler, let's say, I remember very early on when I was at the BBC. Do you remember Last of the Summer Wine?
I do.
It was coming up for its 26th series or something.
Oh, it was
already a venerable institution, but it didn't rate that well. And it appealed, as you can imagine, to a very old audience.
Did you kill it off?
No, I didn't. But I remember the scheduler. I hadn't been there very long. It came up, and he looked at me and he said, a guy called Liam Keelan, who I'm sure you know, lovely guy.
I sat next to him at the Everton-Liverpool game at the weekend. He's a big Evertonian.
Well, there we are. And it wasn't a bad result for Everton, was it?
No, if you get beat 2-1 in the last minute, it's a great result, Peter.
I think I turned off when it was 1-0.
Thank you. Thank you for that. You just triggered me, by the way.
Liam looked me in the eye and he said, "I dare you."
Yeah.
In that Liverpool accent.
Yeah, that wasn't the Liverpool accent, by the way. That was probably...
It wasn't far off.
That was...
I dare you.
That was Cardiff via
Surely
Hyderabad.
Is about
dare you.
And he was basically, "I dare you to cancel it." And I thought, I don't want to, be known as the man who's cancelled Last of the Summer Wine. But ultimately, as I say, there's a schedule to fill. And the easy thing is to say, we'll do one more.
Yeah.
Because then we haven't got to replace it. We haven't got to take a risk on anything. It might be in slow decline, but still people watch it and they will make a hell of a fuss if you cancel it. So, okay, let's just do one more.
But do you not think things...
Whereas I don't think streamers think
exactly.
like
that. Exactly. That was what
Why would streamers think like that? They're much more ruthless.
They've got the data and they've got hard data.
Yep.
So, as we know, there are 3 kinds of shows. When you launch them, one is the breakout hit, which is great, and that's like catching lightning in a bottle. There's the flop, and 2 of they're very easy decisions. The flop, you don't recommission. The hit, you recommission immediately. But then, I think
in the middle,
a lot of those shows are in the middle, where
that's where you earn your salary. That's where you've actually got to make
broadcaster discretion.
Absolutely, but broadcaster discretion in linear broadcasters, if you like, in the old days, was very much discretion. There wasn't. I mean, there were ratings, and you could look at the reviews to see what they said in the Guardian or the Independent. But ultimately, it was a judgment. You did not have access to the sort of data that Netflix or Disney
it's also
or
their data
Apple
on
or whatever will have.
But their data on streamers is quite predictive. So they'll say, based on what this show is getting now, we don't think if we brought it back for a second season, it would be soft. It wouldn't increase, it would decrease. And they've got now 10, 15 years worth of data.
And it makes it much harder for you as a producer to argue to fight your corner. Because if you're fighting your corner against this anonymous stuff called data, which they're very protective of and they don't share with you, all the arguments we used in the old days.
There's no emotion anymore.
There's no, Well, I think that's a bit black and white.
Well, I think they can,
but definitely there's been a shift in that direction.
Yeah, but I do think then that what we're looking at is a world in which there'll be certainly on the streamers. I think the long-running series will become few and far between. I think you're going to get 2 series of this, or maybe a series of that, maybe 3. If you look at certainly on Netflix, I'm not so familiar with Amazon. In fact, nobody is. But the truth is that you are seeing shows being cancelled after a couple of series because they think they've done it, and the people
after one,
or even after one. So it's just interesting to see that I think that a linear broadcaster will sometimes employ not just their head but their heart and think, actually, there's something in this show I want to kind of investigate.
And there are famous examples of shows that didn't really catch fire. And Blackadder. Because it changed radically between series 1 and series 2.
That's an extraordinary story.
Halved the budget, put it in a studio, whoosh.
Would that happen nowadays?
But there are other shows that were like slow burns, but a slow burn required a broadcaster who kept faith. And I'm not sure there's a slow burn in the streaming world.
Well, I think Apple is the exception. I think the way they commission their shows is I don't think they...
That's true. I mean, we're talking about Slow Horses here, aren't we?
I don't think that's
right. Have they done it with others?
I think Slow Horses. I think there's a show I bang on about called Drops of God. That no one watches.
I watched it, Jim.
But they commissioned it. It's a classy show.
Yeah, no, it's very classy, actually. It's an unusual show.
And the morning show, which is now a hit for them. I mean, I watched the first episode of that years ago, and I didn't go back to it. And I was talking to David Crane, who wrote Friends, and he said, are you watching the morning show? I said, well, I didn't really get into it. He said, no.
I find that a busman's holiday.
He said, you've got to watch the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
And I watched the first, and I really got it. And now I've just seen the 5th series. It just happened, and it's a great show. You like it. It's about,
I know, but
it's about feckless TV people, Peter.
No, that's the problem. I see too many of them in real life. We got time for one more question.
It's a question from Andy Lockwood, and it's an interesting question. My question for you chaps, he says, concerns how stars are frequently handled during terminations. Why do high-profile sackings happen with so little notice, consideration, care, or direct communication? It seems that front-of-camera talent deserves better treatment than finding out their fate through the press. So, to whom is he referring, do you think?
Almost everybody who's ever been sacked. The thing is, of course, the people who are making these changes that they see as necessary in order to keep their schedules fresh or to revive, to give a program a fresh look or whatever, try to do it with consideration and care, try to communicate it correctly, etc., etc. But the truth of the matter is the person who is being let go will almost never see it that way. So that's why, the way it looks to Andy Lockwood is that, broadcasters are just callous and tactless and careless and so on. But I mean, having been in this position for many years, believe me, they're not. They know it's a big deal. But at the same time, if you never made a change on screen, like in a long-running program, then
David Attenborough, you mean? That's been very unsuccessful, hasn't it? Keeping him on that. God Almighty.
People who presented programs would literally be there forever because they're not going to leave, and slowly the screen would fill up with grey hair, etc., etc. So it's a tricky issue. I'm glad I'm no longer in the position.
We're all glad you're no longer in that position. But the truth is that aren't there different kinds of sackings? I mean, you've got the Hugh Edwards kind of sackings.
No, that's different. That doesn't need an awful lot of consideration.
Then you got the refreshing.
No, I'm talking about the refreshing of programs.
So
I'm talking
replacing
about
Michael Aspel with...
Well, Michael Aspel replaced with Fiona Bruce. I've mentioned this before as a really good example of it, because mainly because Michael Aspel was such a gentleman. He saw it coming. He didn't make it difficult for me.
He did it with grace.
He did it with grace. He was utterly charming. But I can think of another one, and I really don't want to kind of name names. Another long-running program that have been presented by the same person since the very beginning for over 20 years.
Right.
But it was feeling a bit old-fashioned and needed a refresh, and that was painful. And he didn't like it.
No.
He didn't like it, and he blamed me personally. But by the way, and this is something to think about, if you're going to apply to be Ian Katz's successor, do not think you can do one of those jobs and win universal popularity with everybody.
No.
Of course you can't, because it's your job to make changes as you see fit, or as you and your colleagues see fit, to keep schedules fresh and to keep programs moving forward. I went to theatre last night. I was talking to somebody who used to work on the South Bank show.
Right.
And she confirmed that Melvyn Bragg, a brilliant broadcaster, incredibly distinguished career, is still, as it were, sticking pins into a wax doll of me. Because of the demise,
off me, actually.
Because of the demise of the South Bank show at ITV.
The South Bank show.
15/6. Oh, that's not a bad impersonation.
He's like, he was in the room there for a minute.
So it's like being in my time, which he doesn't do that anymore either.
No, well, he's now in his dotage. He's a fine.
Late 80s. But what a distinguished career he's had. But he, I think it's fair to say, he didn't take it well when it came to an end at ITV, and he slightly personalised it at me, which no quarrel. I was doing the job, so
well, I think it's the way you laughed all the way through. I think that was. I think he thought that was particularly insensitive.
Didn't know such thing. If I had been laughing, he wouldn't have noticed because he was shouting so loud.
All right, so
have we answered? I don't know whether we're answering any of these questions, but Andy, by the way, hopefully that's given you an insight.
It's a really good question, Andy. And
it's a good question, but don't for a minute think that people try to do it badly. They try to do it well.
Of course.
But the people to whom it's done will very rarely give them any credit for that.
I do think that when you are letting go of somebody from a job they've been doing for a while on screen, I think the correct way is to do it like you said. You have a drink with Michael Aspel, you explain the context.
I think in the moment when the producers feel this podcast needs a bit of refreshing, I'll do it personally to you,
Thank
Jim.
you. Stab me in the front, Peter. Stab me in the front. But I remember once we took Clive Anderson's show, Clive Anderson Talks Back, from Channel 4 to the BBC. Alan Yentob.
Oh, I remember this, yes.
Brought Clive to the BBC, to BBC One. And
it felt like a promotion.
Clive was obviously thought, great, I'm on BBC One.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought it was a perilous move because on Channel 4 he was in the top 5 shows every week.
And able to be kind of impish and irreverent.
Exactly.
And be a sort of anti-chat show rather than a chat show.
Yes. Goes on BBC One. It was a new controller had come in. He shall remain nameless, but his surname is that of a well-known fish.
Peter Halliburton. That's who you're talking about.
No. Oh. And it wasn't Sam Codd either.
How many guesses have I got?
You got one more guess. It was Peter Salmon.
Oh, Peter Salmon. Oh,
yes.
Damn.
He lasted a couple of years before he was smoked. Anyway, can we get off the fish jokes, please? I'm trying to elevate this to a story that has some meaning for the people listening to it. Anyway. So
that ship sailed a long time ago.
We go in for the meeting, and I can tell already that it's one of those meetings because we get slathered with praise. Yeah. Oh, guys, great to see you.
So you're reading the room because you've been in many meetings like this.
So I was thinking, all right, where's this guy going with this? And he says, Clive, look, I just want to refresh the channel a bit, and I think what you've done brilliantly, these shows, we like to change how you are on the channel. Okay, fine. So he says, I want to give the talk show a break for a while. And why don't we think of a show, which is a format show, where you sum up the week on TV for the BBC One audience? Oh, okay. So it's a half-hour show going out at 10:30 at night, not a talk show going
out. It could
out.
sound a little bit like Have I Got News for You, which you were already making.
It's more of a pop culture thing.
Okay, pop culture and Clive.
And using clips of what's been on telly that week. So on the way back in the car, we were going at the A40, and Clive said, what was that meeting about? What was that about? I said, he's just fired you. I mean, he's giving you, it's almost like being called into the Foreign Office. It was the way the BBC did it in those days. They didn't fire you. They kind of just let you bleed to death in a show that of no consequence.
And
that, I think, is a miserable way to fire somebody.
And I'm guessing Clive will come away from that once he's sort of, worked out the code, or you've worked it out for him, not feeling overly warm towards Peter Salmon. And I would understand why.
Me neither.
But having also, as it were, been the Peter Salmon in these things, I'm sure he thought that was quite a good way to do it. Whether it was or not, you can judge, and you were there, I wasn't. But as I say, I don't think many people in television relish doing this sort of thing.
No. Listen, these questions have been really good. So
please send in questions.
Just send your questions in, and we'll do our best to give them the once-over. Okay, Peter, I think that's all from us
this week. Thanks very much for listening.
You can send us an email or get in touch via our socials. All the info is in the description.
Or even better yet, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel?
Thank you for listening, if you've bothered to listen. And if you enjoyed it, please tell your friends and follow Insiders wherever you enjoy your podcasts.
Goodbye.